That's okay. I'll try to remember what I.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting, and you can find a copy of my book at my website, emailrevealer.com. If you enjoyed today's show, check out our member section at OppermanReport.com. We have all kinds of exclusive content. I just put up 2 interviews up there, with one with Stu Webb, where he interviews me about my involvement in the Katie Doe lawsuit against Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump in 2016. And also an interview with Servando Gonzalez, who has some very unique opinions about Cuba and Fidel Castro. If you want to check out our archives, go to Spreaker.com. You can see all of our shows you won't find up on YouTube. In fact, we have a previous show there with our guest today, who's Jody Williams. She's an ExMadam. She runs sexworkersanonymous.net, and we did a 2-hour show with her recently. Fascinating content. She knew every single one of the big shot madams back in the 80s. Heidi Fleiss and Madam Alex, the DC Madam Deborah Jean Palfrey, the Mayflower Madam Sidney Biddle Barrows, Dennis Hoffa, and even more. Jody Williams, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. Jody's such a sweetheart. We just screwed up the intro there, and Jody was kind enough to let me start over. But she's a trooper, man. Thank you so much, Jody. Remind the audience, who is Jody Williams?
Well, I was a top madam in Los Angeles back in the 80s. And there was basically about 3 of us that, ran LA back then at the time, as far as madams went. And you have to realize that without the internet or Google, we had to rely on madams for high-end escorts back then. And it's interesting fact is if you look on Google, you'll see that every top madam in the country was arrested in 84. So it was a very difficult year. And it was at that time I decided to quit. But I found it was impossible to quit. I was very fortunate to some of the people I had been involved with what's now called Iran-Contra. We didn't have a name for it back then, but, there was some other dealers and smugglers who were also trying to exit that helped me get out. And that's when I became angry. I became angry that there was no resources for us. I also saw that there are people that are trafficked. They're forced, and they were treated like criminals by the system across the board, and that made me angry. So through the hotline that I started, we were originally Prostitutes Anonymous, but it became Sex Workers Anonymous with time. But as we, got the hotline going and the first alternative sentencing program going, et cetera, and the system began to see that there were actual victims of being forced into prostitution. 13 years later, we saw the Trafficking Act of 2000 pass, which was great. It gave federal recognition for those who are, forced into prostitution. Then, of course, I've been seeing how the movement's been hijacked, and that's a whole other story. But basically, I've been running the hotline and the 12-step program since 1987 now.
And since we did our last interview, we've spent a bit of time talking off the air about different things and contacting each other as well. It's always been pleasant and positive. But you've told me about, though, that you've worked for local politicians and law enforcement and stuff like that. They've actually contacted you for you to inject yourself into situations and rescue some of these girls.
Yeah, and that's another thing that kind of honestly makes me kind of angry.
Yeah.
Because, I run a 12-step group. We don't go after government grants. And, I hear things like Polaris gets $20 million grants from Google and Facebook, and these other groups get all these big grants from the federal government. I don't get outside funding. When women are calling me up, or men, calling me up for help, they don't have any money. So we're just basically a volunteer group. And give you an example of something that makes me angry, I guess. I think it's unfair. I don't know. I understand, but I'm not happy about it. Is like back in 2003, for example, I got this call from a Nevada politician, and he asked me if I would rescue this woman that was being held hostage by an extremely violent and dangerous pimp. And I'm like, why do you want me to get involved in this? Why don't you call Metro, Because normally I do try to work with local law enforcement. I don't like to go off like some cowboy, And he explained to me, we can't get involved in this one. And I'm like, why? And he says, well, oh, sorry about that.
It's
He
okay.
goes, if we get involved in this, he said, the guy's connected to Snoop Dogg. And he said, if we get involved in the situation with Snoop Dogg, the media's got, and he goes, we don't want another OJ. And I'm like, so you kick this off to me? You know, like, can I get some kind of help? He goes, nope. He says, we have to have all plausible deniability. We'll tell you where she is, you know, but then we have to stand back and let you handle it. And I'm like, oh, lovely. You know, guy had a huge, long, arm-long record of, you know, violent arrests and, you know, throw me off to this one, right? But, you know, and it bothers me because then, you know, they turn around and they make all this big media about these other groups that, of course, they're giving grant money to. But when the, you know, stuff hits the fan, they're calling me up to go in and do things. So, you know, it just kind of bothers me sometimes.
And you explained to me, too, that when you rescued that young lady, she was naked, pregnant, chained to a radiator or something like that, right?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I couldn't even believe it. We found her naked. She was pregnant and literally chained to the bathroom sink in a completely vacant apartment. He'd evidently gotten rid of all the furniture, she said, for drugs. So, I mean, she was literally like an animal. And, you know, I was able to get some help. They were able to pull him in, the pimp, out of there on some warrant situation because I'm like, can you give me some help? And they did pull him in on some kind of, you know, excuse to get him out of the way so we could get in and get her out of there without, you know, being in too much danger. But, yeah, I mean, because I call it Snoop's revival tour because what he was doing then was he was in an RV. He was traveling from town to town. And, of course, you know, everybody wants to meet Snoop. And then he would go through his basic turnout routine. And then when the girl would come off the RV, that's when the local pimps would snatch her up because, you know, she'd already been turned out and ready to go. And the pimps that were waiting outside the RV were not nice, and they did not check for ID.
And,
you know,
the guy who
those
got
girls were underage.
So there was a guy who was arrested in this case, and then also too when you started making noise about this, because you mentioned the name Snoop Dogg, right? When you started making noise about this, he actually wrote some kind of a letter or an article where he kind of admitted to his complicity or made an apology.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because I started, you know, we had to deal with the situation after Nevada. We had to deal with it from the next city and the next city. And I'm having to put our members at great risk to get involved with this, and we weren't getting any help. And then I'm hearing a lot of talk about, oh, we prosecute anybody. We prosecute any trafficker. I'm like, really? Really? You're going to, you know? So I started pressuring the local district attorneys, you know, from the towns that we did rescues in, to do something about it. I said, I've got victims, I've got witnesses, I've got evidence. Do something about it, you know? And they were, like, again, just not wanting to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So I think it was his way of trying to go. I felt this way. I felt he was going nan at me, you know, by getting up in the Rolling Stone and confessing to the whole thing. Puts it out in Rolling Stone, like, what are you going to do about it? And then he went through, I don't remember what country he went to. He supposedly had some religious conversion where he said, oh, God, I can't believe I did those things, you know, and I don't know. I don't remember the whole story, but, you know, then at that point, the victims were like, I don't want to get involved in this because, you know, it was, the victims were so, let's put it this way, they've seen the media circus that can happen when they come forward and the celebrities involved. And they weren't worried that he'd hurt them, but they were worried. I mean, the other pimps that were involved and the NFL players that were involved, because the guys that he set up as Johns, he claimed this was his fantasy to turn them out. And the guys that he had pretending, or is no difference, pretending or real, to be Johns, were NFL players. These are 300-pound football players. So the fact that there was multiple celebrities involved, these women were like, you know, I'll be ripped to shreds. Not even so much that, but there's been other cases like in Charlie Sheen where some people have gone missing and been murdered. I mean, they have reason to worry they might not even make it to court if they testified. So a lot of these victims are scared to come forward when celebrities are involved.
Now previously, before in this interview, you mentioned the Iran-Contra, and I sent you a link. Did I send you a link? I told you Ari Ben-Menashe, who's a notorious Mossad agent, claimed that during Iran-Contra, when he was a part of these arms deals to Iran on behalf of the government of Israel, that he knew a young man named Jeff Epstein who was running errands for Mossad. What do you make of that?
Well, I believe it because, one of the biggest dealers, I mean, big, huge, and it was like 98% pure, was this guy in North Hollywood that, we all called the Israeli. So, I mean, and there's other things that I've seen of the Israeli influence with Iran-Contra, so I wouldn't doubt it at all. Again, these people don't tell me, oh, I'm Mossad,
Right.
I don't know. But you can kind of guess. I mean, the guy had obviously some kind of connections and money to be that blatant as he was back then in the 80s, And then, of course, the other agencies I've seen, I guess you call them escort agencies, the ones that are the most protected, the ones that are the most dangerous, are connected with, I'd have to look up the guy's name, but it was when Elliot Spitzer got arrested, the Emperor's Club. That was owned by an Israeli. And it bothered me the way they focused on Kristen Davis, the madam. They put all the heat on her, but she wasn't the one that owned the agency. It was this guy in Israel that was very well known, and they kept burying his involvement under a rug. But, even that, someone leaked that tape of Elliot Spitzer to the press, which meant they wanted all hell to break loose, and that tells you right there's way more than just prostitution going on with this, or they wouldn't be going to that kind of trouble, Now,
also, too, in your involvement with these Iran-Contra types and back then, any contact with Adnan Khashoggi, who's notorious for his sex trafficking as well?
You mean the royalty?
Yeah, Adnan Khashoggi, who was the arms dealer, was involved in Iran-Contra, and also admits to using prostitutes and prostitution supplying women, friends with Donald Trump. Any contact with him?
Well, again, names, I don't know names. I just know that, there was a big, because you got to realize when you're dealing with what they were dealing with, how prostitutes go hand in hand with these deals. I mean, you got a group of guys sitting around with a bunch of drugs and money locked up in some house or a ranch somewhere, wherever they're isolated and they're on lockdown. And the only way to keep them in one place, and that used to be a lot of my instructions, is I'd hear, hey, we've got a guy camping on a shipment and he's going stir crazy. We need to keep him in the house. Send somebody over there to keep him busy. I mean, and that's the way it kept them sort of where they needed to be and not to run off or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Gotcha.
Especially if you had a group of them somewhere. You had to keep them occupied because we didn't have the internet or TV back then like we have now. So we'd send some strippers over to them and they'd keep them, sitting where they needed to be sitting or doing what they needed to be doing. And rather than just running off or, getting negligent or whatever.
Gotcha.
But there was a huge Israeli influence. And also even connected with the royalty, the Saudi Arabian royalty. We had a lot of more of the sex trafficking part would happen with the royalty because they like to own white women. That's where we had a lot of women going and not coming back.
Right. I was about to bring that up. What do you hear about Dubai these days? You hear about these young girls, I'm going to Dubai, and then you never hear from them again.
No, you will not hear from them again because, I would, there's a difference when you'd get like someone from the royal family would come in, for the weekend and I'd, hear, well, we need someone special that can do this or special do that. Yeah, that was just, for the evening. But when you'd hear, oh, well, we need them to, get into another country. See, like, I give you like an idea. I don't know how many of your guests have seen Confessions of a Dangerous Mind with Chuck Barris. And people have asked me, like, how on earth or why would Chuck Barris be involved with being a CIA operative? But actually, you have to understand how the dating game worked. The dating game is they're doing these audition tapes of beautiful women, in Los Angeles, getting to know them to put them on the show as far as the audition tapes. Well, what Chuck did was those tapes of those women were sent to the Saudi Arabian royal family. All I kept hearing was royal family. I don't know names for the other, but the tapes were sent over there and they would pick, like I want this one, I want that one kind of a thing. And, there would be, at the time, they're going to be on the show. Oh, they're going to win. And, Chuck even would escort them. But then a lot of them weren't coming back. And, I would get this stonewall when I would try to verify if they came back or not. I'd hear, oh, well, she decided to run off here. Or she decided to stay long. I could tell I was getting the shuffle. And after a few times, I began to realize that these women were not coming back, and the more noise that I started making about it, it's a day that I still have nightmares about this day, because they decided to tell me what they were doing and to show me there was not a damn thing I could do about it. Because again, you have to realize that before the Trafficking Act was passed, it was not illegal to traffic American women. That's why I know Bruce Lee was actually, I really believe, in Enter the Dragon, trying to tell people it was not illegal to traffic American women back then, because there's an incident where they were trying to get me to help them pick women that would disappear, which of course I would not get involved in. I don't think it sounds funny. I don't mind renting, but I know that they're coming back. But it was when I was hearing that they weren't coming back. I don't know what's happening to them at all, other than I just hear they like white girls, but I don't know what that means, what's going to happen to them when they're over there. And it's not like they can go to the police. The police are, not going to do anything, especially when it's not illegal. But I mean, to kind of drive the point home to me about how I needed to cooperate, they picked me up one day. One of the guys that I knew was CIA, and there was a girl that they'd knocked out, and they put her on a diplomat's plane down over, LAX. And the guy just basically said, do something, to kind of drive the point home. There really wasn't much I could do. And I'll never forget that day, because I called the police. I tried calling airport security. And, of course, I sounded like a raving lunatic saying there's a drugged girl on this plane. And all I kept hearing was, it's a diplomatic plane. There's nothing we can do about it. And then, why are you asking? How do you know? And then turning in on me. So it's like, oh, great, But, I mean, there's nothing you can do to stop a diplomat's plane. I don't know what happened to that woman after that, And, I mean, I hear stories, they, went off for a few weeks and came back home, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But the women that I saw going over to those other countries never came back, and I never heard from them again.
Around that same period of time when the dating game and Chuck Barris was all out there, there was rumored, at least, that I've heard these rumors, that a lot of these young actresses you saw in TV series back then, a lot of these young teenage girl actresses would, and especially when the series was over and they were desperate for money, they would go off on these trips to Saudi Arabia, these weekend trips. But many of them did traumatized by it.
Some that came back were very traumatized by it, because, they didn't like American women. And some of these men would take out their emotional problems on American women by abusing these girls. So some of them went through some pretty hellish experiences. Yeah.
Okay, now,
I've heard of one girl who said she had a great time. That's like, I don't know what happened with her.
Right.
But the rest of them tell me horror stories of what happened to them when they were gone over there.
Now, since we had our last conversation on the air, I had been contacted by a woman named Jessica Collins. Now, Jessica Collins has put out a video on YouTube where she claims that she was a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. And in fact, she claims she's the only real victim of Jeffrey Epstein, and all the other ones are fake, because then she's the real one, because no one will help her, she can't get a lawyer, she can't get any help. Okay. Now, when she contacted me several months ago, it was after our interview, and she used your name. She says, "Hey, I've been in touch with Jody Williams, and I've been in touch with Fiona Barnett, and I've been in touch with Wayne Madison, but now I want to talk to you, and maybe you can help me." What was your experience with Jessica Collins?
Well, first of all, I want to make clear she did not call our hotline for help.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm going to say that is anybody who calls the hotline for help, I don't discuss their call. So
okay.
if she had called the hotline for help, I wouldn't, talk to you about this. But she didn't. She called me up at one point and started telling me how she had been a friend of Jeannie's. And she called her Deborah, which threw me because she never used that name with anybody. And
you're talking about the D.C. Madam, Deborah Jean Parfrey.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I was very close with her. I spoke to her every day for the last couple of years before her death. So, I knew her pretty well. I knew the way she did things. I knew, a lot about her personally. So she tried to tell me that she had for Deborah. And I'm like, okay, which it shocked me. Why am I hearing from you now? You know, because basically anybody that did know her, we were all talking to each other towards the end there. So we still talk occasionally. You know, I've still talked to Montgomery a few times. So, I mean, I'm like, well, where are you popping up from, you know? And I was trying to understand what she wanted, you know, and she did tell me at first she laid this thing about, did I know any lawyers, you know, that kind of thing. Well, yeah, I'm a paralegal by trade, and I'm not going to waste anybody's time. So I'm like, okay, before I take you to a lawyer, like, you know, let me look at your case, you know, let's see if you got a case. And, you know, nothing. I mean, you know, I'm hearing all these stories, but then I'm asking for evidence, you know, and it's becoming pretty apparent to me that nothing's washing with her story, which is why anybody who knows me knows that if I do believe someone's credible, I will be a fierce mother lion for them. And I would have called you if I believed her story. But I get all kinds of kooks call me with all kinds of stories, and I'm not going to waste anybody's time with it if I don't think it's real. So no, that's why I didn't call you with her. And I was really angry to hear that she used my name, which I've noticed she's not the first one that's done this, by the way. I've had a couple of other women that I don't believe are victims run around using my name because I think it gives them credibility. No, if I believe somebody, I'll be calling about them, you know. Otherwise, no. That, you know, because you can imagine how many cuckoos call me in the middle of the night, you know?
Yeah, that's so true.
I mean, you know, all I can say with her is none of her story washed, not a bit of evidence, nothing even jived with the way she told me the stories.
Now, she told me that when she was 23 years old, she answered an ad for the ExMadam, Deborah Palfrey, and then she was abducted by Palfrey. So someone I'm working on behalf of Palfrey abducted her. What do you make of that? Did she tell you that?
Not Palfrey style. No, that part, she told me nothing of the abduction because she knew I wouldn't buy it, okay. You know. Palfrey was a victim herself. You know, there's no, I mean, maybe somebody who was part of who was victimizing Palfrey, because, I mean, Palfrey was basically a victim herself. She was being forced to stay in the game long after she wanted to quit. You know, the government was behind her. The only reason she went to trial and wouldn't take a plea bargain is she'd had enough of what the government was doing to her. So she'd have no reason to be kidnapping someone for her own ends. That didn't make any sense at all.
So, but she never even told you that part.
Especially after Brandy got murdered. She did believe that Brandy Britton was murdered because when Brandy Britton was getting ready to go to trial on her own case, there were some politicians that had been regulars of her that we kind of believe obviously didn't want her getting on the stand and talking. So, I mean, but she knew Brandy Britton had been murdered to keep her quiet also. So it just doesn't even sound like anything Jeannie would do. What for? Why on earth would she kidnap her for? I mean, it just, you know, maybe somebody who knew Palfrey, but not Palfrey herself.
Well,
just doesn't, you know, and there's another thing I asked her. I said, where did she interview you? What name did she use? Where's your phone number in her phone logs? I mean, when I started grilling her about Jeannie, she just backed up on me and said, oh, you're one of them. Oh, now we're getting paranoid, huh? No, I told her, I said, the minute you use my name, though, you involved me. And that's what I got angry about, was that she sucked me into this, you know?
A couple of things, too. She told me that she's a targeted individual and that when she leaves her house, her neighbors scream at her, whore, whore. And I says, well, how do your neighbors know about this? And she says, well, when I first moved here, I told them. Then I asked her, well, how do you support yourself? And she says, well, I'm supported by the same man who abducted me on behalf of Palfrey. All these years.
Now, does that make any sense at all?
No, it does. This is why
if somebody kidnapped you, you'd have him pay your bills?
This is what I ultimately wound up hanging up on her because, again, she couldn't even maintain the appointment and would start accusing me of being disrespectful and that I was late, that I waited 45 minutes before I called him. And actually, I was calling her for 15 minutes. She was late for 15 minutes. Now, she had mentioned to me initially that she was sex trafficked to Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew of York at a hotel in D.C., but they never told her what their names was, and the hotel wasn't under their name, but that 10 years later she saw them on TV and she recognized them. Is that along the lines what she told you?
No, but okay, here's speaking from example. I mean, this is the chicken or the egg sometimes, because a lot of survivors of trafficking have been through horrible experiences, and they are a little off.
They're damaged.
Okay?
I agree.
I have my moments when I get a little off too. Now, I've been through. Okay, I'll give you an example of things that from experience. Like, I remember once I got asked to go see a man. All I was told was he was a politician, and the guy was the CIA guy, and he was saying, we need somebody who isn't going to blow it. We need someone intelligent. Can you go personally? Because I didn't like to go on dates myself, but he said that this guy needed somebody special. Would I go? So I went, and I didn't know the guy from Adam. I mean, back in the 80s, I don't know what politicians look like, so I just knew he was a guy. Took care of it. Yes, he was very intelligent. He wanted an intelligent conversation. And you know what? Years later, I saw him on television. And like, oh, that's who I was with, So, I mean,
that's possible.
You have those kind of things happen. You know what I mean? Where you may not even know until years later. But I don't know how to explain it. You don't black things like that out. You just don't recognize them until maybe you see him on television, and then you realize who that was, And I do that all the time. I've been in situations where I've been taken to places. I was kidnapped one time. I was taken in, and I was locked in a crack house for 2 weeks and not let out. I didn't know where it was. I will say this, years later, I went and found it, because I was, trying to document things that happened to me. So even though you may not know where someplace is or know an address, you can go back, and the memories will come back, and you can find it. I mean, there are ways that you can, trigger your memory. But when there's something about the way she couldn't remember certain things wasn't jiving to me from experience,
When you spoke to her, it does make sense. When you spoke to, because I know exactly what you're talking about. The victims and survivors are damaged people, and you can tell when one is and one isn't. You can tell when someone's legit, and you react appropriately. Now, did she ever mention to you the name Jeffrey Epstein or Prince Andrew?
Yeah, she did. But I mean, by that point, she was also telling me about her drug use. So I was just having one in one ear and out the other at that point.
Okay, now what about, we'll get into the drug use in a minute. Now, what about John McCain? Did she ever mention the name John McCain to you?
Yeah, she did.
What about Joe Biden?
Yeah, I think she had off a whole bunch of names to me. Yeah, I think Biden was in one of them.
Okay, because she never mentioned Biden to me until after we disconnected. So that was.
That's another thing that doesn't jive. I've answered this hotline, like I said, since 1987. That's 30-something years I've answered this hotline. And let me tell you something. Real victims, it takes them a long time to start telling me names. They got to learn to trust me. They got to spend some time with me, and then slowly, I mean, they don't just drop the bomb in the first call. That's another thing that just, set off alarm bells. And I was finally asking her, like, why are you even calling? Because like I said, she did not call the hotline for help. So I'm like, and obviously what ever happened to her was years ago. So I'm like, why are you calling me? And I couldn't get a straight answer out of her. So I don't know what's up with her. I don't know what her agenda is. And I sure as hell don't know why she wanted to suck me into it by dropping my name to you.
And after you spoke to her and said, hey, please don't use my name anymore, how did she react to that?
That really shocked me, because I had one other fake victim running around trying to get people to believe her by dropping my name. And when I asked her to stop and threatened her with a cease and desist, she did. She did stop. This one, though, got angry and started saying, I'm going to keep using your name. Tough shit. Oh, what? That really pissed me off, because... And again, I don't understand. If she wants to do her thing and run around and do her videos, fine, but leave me out of it. I don't understand why she wants to suck me into it.
And also, too, we discussed also, too, like, how is it that this video got so much traffic in such a short time? I do videos on YouTube all the time mentioning the name Epstein and real victims' names all the time. I don't get 50,000 hits overnight. What do you make of that?
That's abnormal. That, like I said, there's something, I'll tell you, I have been racking my brains since you called me about that video, trying to figure out why is she involving me? What's the agenda here? Because here's what's bothering me. Again, I know a lot of people that are very damaged, okay? I know people in NA that have a lot of brain damage from drug use, okay? This woman is not jibing to me. She's not like some crazy person. She's very rational sounding, you know, and this is what's bothering me. She's not sounding like a traumatic, you know, victim. She's not sounding like she's been through these things. She sounds extremely clear-headed when she was talking to me. And the one thing I don't know is what she talked to me about was so intelligent at first. And I get calls like this from time to time that I have to wonder if that's what this is. Because I do get these weird calls from time to time because actually what she'd really talking to me about had nothing to do with Epstein or Palfrey. That just, I guess she was trying to get my trust or something. I don't know. But she started talking to me about the Silk Road and about what was going on with the Silk Road and the way the government came in and confiscated the drugs and killed the owners of the site over in Thailand. And she started showing me these things. I mean, basically, she explained to me in her terms a theory of how the government was orchestrating the creation of Silk Road in order to, it made a lot of sense, actually, to generate a lot of addicts, you know, to go on high so they could gather a lot of incriminating evidence and then also get the drugs into the country by confiscation. Now, see, this struck me as really interesting because, yeah, in the 80s, they were having to smuggle the cocaine in. And, you know, they had to pay off a lot of different people on the way to smuggle it in. And I actually thought, you know, that's really brilliant, is instead of smuggling the drugs in, they're confiscating the drugs in. Oh, wow, what an idea, what a concept. You know, maybe sounds like they evolved and got smarter, you know. And a lot of the stuff she was telling me about the Silk Road clicked, especially like finding the trail of bodies on that one with anybody who might have known that the government, you know, in other words, I looked at it like an evolution of Iran-Contra. That seemed really quite intelligent to me. Now, that's what threw me off is in the video, I listened to the video, she wasn't talking at all about the Silk Road in the video.
Right.
What her and I talked about, the clips, she sent me all these clips about the Silk Road and yada, yada, and the confiscation and how many drugs they, you know, brought into the country that way, you know, kind of a thing, and the whole scam there, so to speak, you know. But so there's something else going on with her than meets the eye, and I just haven't figured out why do they want to talk to me about it or suck me into it. I don't know, you know.
Now,
I don't.
Where did she come about her information about this theory about the Silk Road? Through research or personal experience?
Well, okay. The story she was telling me was that her daughter had supposedly overdosed on FaceTime, on phone. And that the government had the video of this, and that she wanted to file a wrongful death lawsuit against the government for orchestrating her daughter's death. Okay, but that's where things started falling apart. I'm like, okay, can I see a death certificate? Can I see a coroner's report? I mean, nothing I asked her for, you know, was coming through.
Yeah,
so
I never heard that story.
You know, that part, I'm, you know, yeah.
She never told me any of that.
Something wasn't jiving there.
Well, another thing, too, to see if we can share notes, is every time she would call me up or I would call her up, she would always say, are you taping this? Are you taping this? Are you taping this? She was always afraid that I was taping her. Did you have that experience?
That's weird.
Okay, all right. Now,
I mean, it's just weird if for a so-called victim, I mean, all these they don't usually ask me that. But no, she didn't seem concerned about it. But I got to tell you, it was really abnormal the way she reared back and said, I'm going to use your name whether you like it or not. I mean, that's just a really odd reaction. Just seemed very strange to me. There's, like I said, there's something about her that's more than me. Yeah, the 50,000 hits bothers me because, okay, see, there's a lot to what she was telling me initially, though, that made sense because I've seen how things like, for example, when the lawsuit with Craigslist and eBay,
right.
That was very strange because, I mean, I've been a paralegal a long time, and I've never seen the word nominal defendant. So I remember digging in that to ask myself, why would they be suing themselves? Because essentially Craigslist and eBay at that time were the same company. And so I remember my legal mind, I'm going, why are they suing themselves?
Wait,
why
do
are
you mean
they trying to
Craigslist
distance
and
themselves?
Backpage? Do you mean Backpage or eBay?
Well, same thing. Because, okay, that's the thing. I know that Craigslist and Backpage were owned by the same company, but the media makes them appear to be two different companies. But then there was a lawsuit with eBay. And that was, but at the time, they were being held by the same company that was holding Craigslist and Backpage. So again, I had to ask myself, I'm looking at this going, why would they sue themselves? But then I began to follow the trail about the software, the proprietary software. And that I've got to get more analysis from somebody who understands, more techie stuff than me. But there is something going on about, they're creating these lawsuits basically over who owns this technology. And I think it's got to do with the data that they're gathering. Because you think about it, when somebody's going on Silk Road to buy drugs, there's a lot of data about those people that obviously now has been turned over to the CIA. So they know a lot about a lot of people right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The Facebook database where you have ex-friends, people you have a beef with. That's an invaluable database. Let's take a little commercial break here. We're with Jody Williams, who's the owner and operator of this SexWorkersAnonymous.net hotline to assist women and men that are victims of sex trafficking, survivors of sex trafficking, and all that kind of stuff. We'll be right back with more of Jody Williams right after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors.
Hey you, podcast listener. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. Take the blue pill. You wake up in your bed and go back to listening to mundane podcasts that won't challenge your religious beliefs and your so-called truths about reality, the universe, and consciousness. Take the red pill. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast, hosted by Mark Anthony Peterson, and he will show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Event Horizon takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. It's the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast by Mark Anthony Peterson on Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Stitcher, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms. Remember, all we are offering is the truth, nothing more.
PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. Order today at PureSoapFlakes.com, greenhome.com, Amazon.com, or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Jody Williams, who runs SexWorkersAnonymous.net. It's a hotline. It's a help center. One last question is about Jessica Collins, and then we'll move on. You mentioned something about current drug use. She confessed current drug use to you?
Yeah, when she was trying to convince me that, people were out to kill her, I'm like, how do you know? Because again, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. So
Right.
I usually ask certain questions to try to determine if they're paranoid or legitimately, concerned, and she just started telling me about how she was buying drugs from the neighbors, but she thought it was laced. So, yeah, she was talking about drug use. I'm like, well, honey, if you're worried somebody's trying to kill you, what are y'all buying drugs from the neighbors for?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, because I've been hiding out, laying low. You don't even go out for groceries, you know?
Yeah, she
yeah.
Yeah, she told me that she was hiding out from her neighbors too, but she didn't mention the drug use. But there was obvious signs of drug use too and paranoia. Now,
yeah.
Oh boy! Now you're laying low, right? And we were talking off the air too, that and I was just talking to someone recently too about other Epstein victims, young women who are now afraid to come forward.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
there are a lot that are totally afraid to come forward.
And you're telling me even Joe Conforti from the Mustang Ranch. What can you tell us about that?
I'm not so sure. I don't know if he's dead or hiding out, but it's one or the other. He's gone AWOL. So, and that's just not like, you know, Joe. I mean, so either he's did a hoppa and he's in pieces somewhere at the bottom of the ocean, or he's in hiding. But even hiding out, I still think he'd be talking to certain people. You know, like I do know that he called Dennis on his birthday, you know, the night of his death. So I know he was alive then. And, you know, there's usually, you know, I can even get a return phone call out of him, you know. I mean, usually there's some kind of contact, but he's just, a couple of people have noticed he's just gone missing and he's not answering anybody's call. So something's wrong. Something's wrong. Now, I've been having this theory. I started noticing you know, my ears started going up when Whitey Bulger was murdered. I mean, come on. You know, he's in a high security prison and they leave him in the room with an assassin and a lock. That was staged. You know, somebody wanted him dead, obviously, with enough pull to do that. And you know, at first I'm just noticing Whitey. And I know Whitey was involved in prostitution, you know, back in his day kind of a thing. You know, but then I started noticing just other people in the circle. I call it the inner circle. Like, you know, Dennis Hoff's death was very strange. And then his friend Anthony shortly after that. And other people I start noticing. And then Joe goes missing. It's like, you know, because then I have to ask myself, am I being paranoid or is this real? Is somebody really bumping off certain people? And then I look at the common denominator, you know, is that there is an inner circle like Dennis and Joe Conforti. You know, yeah, people in that inner circle are starting to have strange deaths, or in Joe's case, he's now gone. He's disappeared off the face of the earth. No one can find him, so something is wrong there. You know, and I don't think he's hiding. I still think he'd be talking to people if he was hiding. So something's happened to him.
Now, and you said that you suspect that Dennis Hoff might have been murdered.
Oh, I absolutely, not a doubt in my mind, believe something happened to him. Especially other reactions I got from people after his death were abnormal. There were just too many weird things about everything. I mean, I called up there, I sent flowers, I got weird reactions out of people. The way the funeral was set, the way the nice sheriff got turned on me, even the attack on my door. A few. I don't know if I showed you that.
You did. You sent me
pictures.
He
died on October 16th. Yeah, and on November 12th, I had Metro literally spending 2 hours trying to tear down my door. That was one of the most scariest things in my life because they had no warrant, just literally trying to tear down my door to get at me. I don't know what they wanted, but it sure wasn't to talk to me. You know, I mean, I wonder what would have happened to me that night. And that's what I said. There's certain people that's just strange. When I press to get an autopsy, nobody wants to tell me anything. You know, I can't get anybody to answer me from the family. It's just too bizarre. And then I looked in the press. And there was a lawsuit, actually, that Dennis had filed against the Nye County Sheriff talking about that he had been being targeted himself and that weird things were going on. And he believed it was harassment by Nevada, you know, that certain people in Nevada were harassing him. But I didn't see any press about it, which shocked me. And I went over to the Independent, of course, to boast that they're supposedly independent of Sheldon Adelson, and said, hey, why don't you point out, you know, there was this lawsuit where Dennis said that people were targeting him literally right before his death. Why is nobody talking about this lawsuit? You know, and they wouldn't print a thing. I mean, it's just bizarre. It's just weird. And I still haven't seen the autopsy. So what's taking so long about actually seeing it? And then his best friend, Anthony, just shortly after that. I've talked to 3 pilots who said there's no way that the plane could have crashed accidentally the way that it did in that case. They think it was staged. But, of course, Anthony went just about everywhere Dennis did. He was like personal pilot, and he also flew. Let's put it this way. If somebody like Epstein went up to the ranch, Anthony would have flown him. So, and this is what I started, my ears going up, is it's certain people from old school inner circle days that it seems like somebody wants them shut up, like they don't want us talking, because old people know things from back in the 80s, and we've seen a lot of things that maybe, and that's another thing. We've seen things that are starting to come out now. There's all kinds of things that are starting to come out now in the press, and I think a lot of people are running for cover.
Now, Dennis was discovered by Ron Jeremy. What do you know about him?
I don't think Ron had anything to do with it, but, I myself was trying to sort out what happened, because Dennis was in good health. Dennis didn't use drugs. I never heard of Dennis having health problems, so it just seemed somebody just doesn't drop dead like that, and I know that Dennis was hiding because he was up at the, you have to understand the geography of Nevada to understand he was in a very remote location, which was not good for business. He was obviously, in my opinion, there laying low, trying to hide out. And he only had people up for the birthday. So I went through myself all the photos that I could get my hands on. And there was a guy that drove Ron Jeremy to that. I shouldn't put that. What am I saying? I shouldn't talk. But I'm just saying personally. I noticed that there was a kid that drove Ron Jeremy that was some Russian kid. And I know that Dennis was involved in a huge turf war with the Russians. So I just, it just begs questions. Okay. Because there are ways that you can bump somebody off like Dennis was, mix something in the drink, and it would show up exactly the way that it did for his death. It'd be so easy.
And Dennis would take people in like Scott Thornton and Heidi Fleiss, and you believe that they were brought in there under his protection?
Oh, I know Heidi ran to Dennis for protection. Absolutely. Because, I know myself that when I, hit the press in 84, I had people trying to kill me for a solid year. I couldn't leave the house without, literally someone trying to take a shot at me. They'd come to my grandmother's door trying to lure me out of the house. I mean, they're definitely trying to kill me, and of course Heidi was so in her drug world, she didn't believe anything I was telling her at first. Well, she caught on. When her trial started hitting the fan and things started coming unraveled, she started going through the same thing I was going through, and also people worried, what she was going to say, what she was going to reveal, all that talk about her black book. A lot of people got worried. So, next thing I know, she's basically up in Nevada under Dennis's protection.
And Scott Thornton,
nobody's going to mess with her while she's that close to Dennis, working with Dennis.
Why would he take someone in like Scott Thornton, who was the boyfriend of Liberace and was involved in the 4 on the floor murders, with the Wonderland murders? Why would he bring somebody like that into his protection? For things he knew?
Now, well, I just know that, Dennis would protect certain people.
Okay.
I don't know their personal story. I just know that if you did have certain people that wanted to whack you and you did go up under Dennis, I've put people up in hiding under Dennis for protection. And see, that's something I don't talk about too much because most people don't understand. Like, why would I take a trafficking victim up to Dennis to hide them? But sometimes they have to be protected like that. It depending on who they're dealing with and who they're afraid of,
Gotcha. Okay, Jody Williams, we are out of time. We're out of time. What do you want to leave us with, and how can people get a hold of you if they're in trouble and they want your help?
Well, if anybody does need help getting out or just emotional support getting out of the business, it's a difficult thing to get out from. And we've been doing it for over 30 years. We can help you get out. Just give us a call.
What's the number?
It's 702-488-1127, or you can go to sexworkersanonymous.net and always find us.
Jody, thank you so much. Okay, I don't have to say keep in touch because we're in touch all the time. Okay, but thank you so much. I know it's been a busy week for you, and so to squeeze me in here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Jody. Good
night.
All
right.
Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay, well, there you got Jody Williams. who runs this organization called SexWorkersAnonymous.net. And like I could tell you, she is the real deal. I know she's working on real things in real life, real projects, real stuff. And she had her own experience with Jessica Collins, like I did. And both of us independently have come to the same conclusion, shared notes off the air, and again confirmed our conclusions about this, that the story has no credibility. And you got to understand, too, there's a lot of stuff out there, people with a desire to cause confusion, especially in the Epstein case, and to cause distraction and to control the narrative, like the MIT Media Research Lab funding that's out there, sabotaging real workers and real people, real advocates, and real people that can help you. If you need to check out my credentials, I actually had a case involving Epstein, the 2016 Katie Doe lawsuit against Trump and Epstein. I have a lawsuit right now against Disney, the Jordan Pruitt lawsuit. That's my case. So again, a case here against LVMPD we're working on right now, the Byron Williams case. So we are actual people on the front lines actually doing this work and actually advocating for victims. And if you need my help, you can get a hold of me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. And I'll vet out your case for you, and I'll get you an attorney, and I'll get you some help. So there is real work going on out there. So thank you so much, Jody Williams, ExMadam, SexWorkersAnonymous.net. And now a word from our sponsors.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
Hey, check out our brand new sponsor, Dynamic Solutions 2. That's the number 2. They offer a life-changing, dynamic financial solution. The finest in fast, professional, affordable credit repair. Is your credit in bad shape? Do you need a new car? Ready to buy a new house? You want to rent an apartment? Are you going to apply for a job? Any one of these activities, they're going to ask for a credit report, and then check out your credit score. Let Dynamic Solutions 2 erase your negative credit remarks. They have affordable monthly prices. They accept Visa, MasterCard, PayPal options available. You go to www.dynamicsolutions, that's the number 2.com, or call 424-888-2820. 424-888-2820. Now, if you enter promo code ED or you mention Ed Opperman, you get a 10% discount. How's that? You get a free consultation, all negative items removed, get back in positive credit position. Dynamic Solutions 2, life-changing dynamic financial solutions. 424-888-2820. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. You get a 10% discount.
Hey, you, podcast listener. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. Take the blue pill. You wake up in your bed and go back to listening to mundane podcasts that won't challenge your religious beliefs and your so-called truths about reality, the universe, and consciousness. Take the red pill. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast, hosted by Mark Anthony Peterson, and he will show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Event Horizon takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. It's the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast by Mark Anthony Peterson on Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Stitcher, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms. Remember, all we are offering is the truth, nothing more.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
And now a word from our sponsors. oppermanreport.com. Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Do you like the work that you see us doing here at Opperman Report? You can support that work by becoming a member at oppermanreport.com. And as you have access to over 200 exclusive shows and interviews that you can't find on YouTube or Spreaker or iHeart or iTunes or KYAH. You can't find them anywhere else online, exclusive to our member sections, to our members. Also, too, there's images, videos, documents, court docs, a lot of content there at oppermanreport.com. And it's the memberships that support the Opperman Report and allow us to play these shows for free on Friday nights and Saturday nights on all the stations you hear us on. You can also make a donation at oppermanreport.com. If you want to support the show and become a member, I can give you a discount. I'll give you 13 months for $65 if you email me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can hear your ad played here on the Opperman Report, reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis because the show is repeated every day all over the world. Contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com and I'll give you a good deal on advertising rates. Emailrevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey, Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online. Email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat. Locate his hidden assets. Locate his hidden bank accounts. Find his current place of employment and even assist you in obtaining a judgment and recover that judgment for you. Emailrevealer.com. Digital forensics, computer forensics, cell phone forensics, recover deleted text messages. Create a report that you can use in court. Emailrevealer.com, 800-572-9762.